this section is kind of a little bit of a partially it goes back in time to the war, and a little bit, and then also after it, because we have to talk about how the country was being governed during the war because we were considered our own country. So first, I want to take a look at the American story at the top of 221. It's about Daniel Boone. You should be familiar with his name. So let's look at that. It says in 1775, Daniel Boone and 30 woodsmen cut a road over the Appalachian Mountains into Kentucky. They hacked through brush, chopped down trees, and bridged creeks. They labored like this for about 250 miles. Eventually, they arrived in the grassy meadow along the banks of the Kentucky River. Felix Walker, a member of Boone's party, described what he saw. On entering the plain, we were permitted to view a very interesting and romantic sight. A number of buffaloes, supposed to be between 200 and 300, made off in every direction. Such a sight some of us never saw before, nor perhaps ever again. Boone was one of the earliest American settlers in Kentucky. In the late 1700s, most Americans thought of Kentucky as the wild frontier. Some, like Boone, looked at the frontier and saw a world of opportunities. Exploring and governing these lands was the only challenge that faced the new government. So now we have this new land out west because they cut roads through the mountains, and the problem is, whose land is it and how do we govern it? Imagine trying to cut through those mountains, because it's mountains, and they don't have the type of tools we have today. We will, when we head to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., we will drive through the Appalachian Mountains, so you'll get an idea of, if you're awake, it's quite late in the night and early morning, but you'll have an idea of what it looks like, and if you look at it, you'll try to imagine how in the world they were able to do that. So, take a look at moving west, and it's just on page 221, and take a look what they did and what they saw when they got through that area and what it was called. So take a look, just that paragraph on 221 real quick, and then we will. And it's called the Wilderness Road, and basically this road was a trail that led them into Kentucky. Daniel Boone and his people that were with him, they all built this road. There's a picture of Daniel Boone, and on here the map, the red dashed line here is the Wilderness Road. The yellow line is another type of trail that was built later. So this led right through the mountains. Was it an easy road to travel on? Eli?
No.
What made it difficult, Dustin?
It was narrow for carts and wagons, and it was not the smoothest road.
Yeah, it was not very smooth. It was quite narrow. Carts and wagons weren't able to go through there. So in order to get through, basically, how were people coming on this road? How did people get through? They couldn't get in their carts. They couldn't get in their wagons, PJ?
They went by foot or rode horses.
Foot or horseback. So they basically had to carry anything that they took with it or put it on the horses' backs to take it with it. So it wasn't the easiest route. Native Americans were over there. Was interaction between Native Americans once they got through, was it good or bad? Zach?
Mostly bad.
Mostly bad. Led to a lot of violent fighting amongst each other. But the settlers kept on coming. They kept coming through there, and then by the early 1790s, about 100,000 Americans lived there. So people continued to head west to get to these new territories that we had because, remember, according to the Treaty of Paris, where was our western boundary? Mississippi River. So people were going west because we knew we had this area and it was free for us to go to. So that was what was going on in the west. While everybody's heading to the west, in the east, all those states that are already starting to be pretty much developed, they are starting to form governments. Okay? Now, let's, you can flip over to 222, but kind of go back to your think about questions that you did yesterday, because these forming new governments, it goes right with that think about you had yesterday. So if you were chosen as a delegate to kind of represent your state, what would be your main goal in creating a new government? PJ?
Do what's best for the people.
Do what's best for the people? What are some other thoughts on your main goal in creating a government? What would be your main goal, Dustin?
Make it the way that try to be successful with everyone liking it and there's no more fights and violences over it.
Okay, try to keep it peaceful, try to get everyone to like it. We have the people being involved, that's a big one. How many of you said people? Try to get the people involved. Okay. Now, how would you get everyone else to agree with your, any of your ideas? Eli?
Then all the pressure wouldn't be on the government, and some of the choices that are made would be the people, so then the people can really complain to the government about the choices that are made.
So is that what you would say to them? Okay, Bromley?
I said that for each representative of the states, I would show them how it would benefit their state or
Oh, good.
how it wouldn't. So if you disagreed, this would happen.
So kind of show pros and cons almost, so that everyone knows what the benefits of it would be. Drew?
I'd say my first one. The second one won't make sense. It's to have all men and women, black or white, to be able to be free, and to have any religion like Jews to have all three in one. And my next one was that I would say think of the world if blacks were free and whites would be slaves. We wouldn't like it and have our religions free.
Good. PJ?
Oh, any like issues, try to persuade them or give them ideas of ways to fix it.
Good. Different ideas. Zach?
I'd say the main goal would be have an equal say in the matters presented by each of the states.
Okay.
And by doing that, I would say a couple problems that each state is having and say that it will be dealt with fairly and with equal judgment from each state.
Okay. And then at some point you're going to have to vote on whether or not this, whatever your idea is, you're going to have to vote on it. And that there was quite a bit of voting that took place in these forming of governments. So first we had the states, the individual states, forming their own government. Okay? So take a look at the new state governments. And you will see some states do some things a little different than others. Some states do it this way, some states do it this way. All states had this involved. So take a look. It's kind of like a compare contrast a little bit. Take a look under new state governments and see what some states did to form their government, because state governments don't have to be all the same. So take a look at the different state governments and how they, created a government for their state. And then right after independence. What year did we gain our independence in? When was the Declaration of Independence written? And 1776. So we became independent in 1776. So and the war is going on. Immediately after independence, states started to create their own government. All right, and they did not want to destroy what they had as colonies, so they wanted to try to keep it similar. And each state had a bunch of representatives from all over the state that would come together and try to write a state constitution and to form what their government would be like. And some states did things one way, some states did things this way, but they were all kind of similar for the most part. So what were some things that different states did in their government to create it, to just kind of experimenting? What are some things that different states did? Destin?
Some states did different branches.
All right, good. Some states had separate branches. If you look on the bulletin board in the back, on the very right-hand side, there are 3 branches. We'll get to those when we get to the Constitution, but that's 3 separate branches: a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch. Why would government want separate branches? What was the purpose of that? What did they want to make sure of? James?
So the government didn't become too powerful.
So a government wouldn't become too powerful. Good. So some states did the different branches of government and giving different powers. So for instance, in our government, when we get to it a little later, the legislative branch is the branch that has to do with making laws, creating laws. The executive branch is the branch that makes sure that people are passing the law, following the laws. And the judicial branch makes sure that it's kind of people are following it as well. And we'll get into those a little later. But what are some other things? And we got, I guess, let's put that down. Prevent the government from becoming too powerful. And what are some other what are other ways that states had in their government, Cameron?
Some states included a Bill of Rights.
Some states included a Bill of Rights. And where did they get the idea of this Bill of Rights? Drake Peterson?
The English Bill, yeah, the English Bill of Rights of 1689.
Yeah, so they did take some stuff from Britain. They took the idea because the English Bill of Rights, what did the English Bill of Rights make sure happened? What was that? What was the purpose of it? So think about what the purpose of the Bill of Rights would be. What is the purpose of the Bill of Rights? What did they say? What did it give to people? The Bill of Rights, what did it give to people, Peyton?
Rights.
It made sure people's rights were being protected. All right? Again, this was to make sure that the government did not become too powerful. Drew?
Democratic?
What's that?
Democratic?
What about democratic? What do you mean? Are you trying to say some are democratic?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that most of them were democratic, but it went along with the separate branches of government. So some states had different areas like that. All states had one thing in common, and what was the one thing they all had in common? James? They had a Republican form of government, and what is a Republican form? What is a republic? Don?
The people to represent the government.
Very good. So every single state had a Republican form of government, meaning the people choose representatives to govern them. So there you have what the different states were doing. And they were all creating this throughout the war. All right? So keep in mind that they were creating these different things while a war was going on. And during the war, Congress still met. It was called Congress. They still met. And they had to, we have a plan for each state. We have to have a plan of government for our entire country. So they worked out what they were going to do and set up as a government for the country. And that was called, anyone know before I throw it up there? I know you didn't read it. I didn't have you read it for today. Dustin?
Article of Confederation.
The Articles of Confederation. I shortened it to just Articles. The Articles of Confederation was an interesting type of a government. All right? This is what they decided. They knew they had to have a government during the war, so they decided to develop some form of plan. And this started as soon as independence happened, so in 1776. And they knew they wanted a republic. Okay? I want you to look through here. This has some positives in it, but then there's some reasons it did not work out. We don't run our country like this, and it failed, and there's certain reasons why it failed. Okay? So this is a little bit of a longer reading because there's a lot to do with this. So find out a little bit about it, how it worked. I want you to know how it worked, and I want you to know why it failed. So it's on 2 pages there on 222. Read through that and find out how it worked and why it failed. Okay. Articles of Confederation. So while those states, the individual states were setting up not national government, their state governments, the Congress realized it was important to form a national government. And what was it that Silas Deane said? Don?
United we stand, divided we fall.
Correct. So united we stand, divided we fall. He was trying to let people know we need to get united as a country and form a national government, because if we're divided, our country is not going to work. It's going to fail. So in 1776, right after independence, Congress decided it's time to develop a plan. They started working on it right away, and they agreed that what type of government would it be? Dustin?
Republic.
Again, a republic, which is by the people, for the people, and so on. That's the one thing they agreed on. What else? What did they disagree on? What did they disagree on? James? They disagreed about who should control the land. What else did they disagree about? Don?
They disagreed about whether each state should have a voting state that should be
They-
based on population.
Disagreed on how voting should work in the government. Pretty much they disagreed about everything. Okay? they agreed on the one thing that they wanted to be a republic. They disagreed on everything else. So during the war, Congress argued about the government. This is all going on during a war. So it's not good that this is happening. So you've got some important people in Congress meeting in Philadelphia discussing how a government should work while fighting is going on throughout all the states. And they disagreed on, when we do voting in Congress, does each state get one vote? Some people thought every state should get equal vote, one vote. Other states thought if you have more people, you should get more votes. So the bigger states thought, we have more people in our state, we should get more votes than you do. And the smaller states thought, that's not fair, we're smaller states, we can't help it, we should get equal votes. So they argued over that quite a bit. They argued about who's going to control that land west of the Appalachian Mountains. That's all our land, but nobody really controls it. Who's going to control it? So they argued about that. Finally, Congress arrives at the plan of how the government should be. They arrived at, okay, we're going to have this government called the Articles of Confederation, and they have different powers spread out all over the place, and we'll get to that in a second. But they kind of pretty much passed it in November of 1777. So it took about a year to decide this is what it's going to be. It's going to be the Articles of Confederation, and here are what the government is going to look like. And we'll set that up here in a second. The national government had certain things, the state governments had certain things. So look at the national government. When you were reading in there, did the national government, the big government, national government being the people in Washington, well, today would be the people in Washington, D.C. Back then, it'd be the people in Philadelphia, because that was the capital. So, did the national government have a lot of powers or little powers? Lots or little? Raise your hand. Who wants to tell me? Lot or little? Zach? What? A lot? Cody?
Little.
Little. Sorry, Zach. You had a 50-50 shot at it. The national government had few powers. They put most of the powers with the government. Why did they give the national government few powers? What were they afraid of? PJ?
It'd be the national government being too powerful.
The national government being too powerful. They thought, we want to give more power to the states because the national government will be too powerful. Let me give you an example of what people would think of that today. Some people think that the national government today is becoming too powerful. For example, the Obamacare. Some people think that the national government is forcing upon us this health care thing, and they think that the government is becoming too powerful. It should be left up to the small states. That would be an example today. If you've been paying attention to the whole health care deal, some people think that that's the government becoming too powerful. All right? So the national government had few powers. What did they decide upon for each state when they decide, okay, we have to vote on something? What did they decide? Does it go by population? The more people you have, the more votes you get? Or did they decide everybody gets one single vote? What did they decide upon, James? One vote. So who's that going to make happy? Small states. Who's it going to make unhappy? Larger states, okay? Well, we compromised, actually. For representatives, the more people you have, the more representatives you have. But for senators, everybody has the same. So we compromised a little bit. And that's what, here they obviously couldn't figure that out. They had a little bit.
Equally fair because they made a one back then. Smaller states can't help it if they have less population.
Yeah, you're right. Let's see. Let's stop. We'll stop right here, and tomorrow